Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here. And as you know, every other week I join Action for Assange for their vigil broadcast. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to cover this topic as much as I would obviously like to because of everything that's going on in the world. In fact, I wasn't even able to dedicate a video to the fact that, number one, Chelsea Manning had tried to commit suicide. And then in short order after that, Manning was released, as well as Jeremy Hammond. And the really interesting thing about that is now we have calls for Assange to be released, not just based on what we're talking about. And again, actionforassange.com is the website, and you can follow them right here at action underscore for Assange. The really interesting thing now is that doctors are warning that Julian Assange is at increased risk of this coronavirus. So I can't not talk about this coronavirus because it is literally in every single story. And this is also very significant right now because Rikers Island is trending. And we have our first confirmed case in Rikers Island. Again, we can probably expect prison riots the same way as other countries, because what are you going to do when you have a desperate prison population? Do you think that COs are actually going to want to be there for $15 or $20 an hour? I would assume not. The other thing is that Assange's trial is probably going to be postponed. Again, the world is a very different place. I have not been focusing on this virus because I was trying to inflict fear into people. I have not been focusing on this virus because I think it is the hot topic and trend that's going to get me subscribers. It's none of those things. It's that it's literally going to affect every aspect of our lives at this point. Flick off, thank you so much for that super chat. For those that are also unaware, we now have to talk about the fact that the stock market, the floor will not be opening. Everything will be online tradings. Talking about shenanigans being afoot and getting you ready for the stock market to be closed altogether. What do you think banks are going to look like tomorrow morning? And I realize that it's Wednesday evening and we do not have a full lockdown in place in New York City, and I thank God for that. However, what are we seeing? We're seeing a coalition being built between New York State, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania for self-isolation. And whatever they tell you is voluntary or only going to be enforced by police will later be enforced by police and military. For instance, right now it is illegal to be driving in the state of New Jersey unless it is an essential need. I need people to understand that. From 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., you can be pulled over. Your constitutional rights are gone at this point. And for those that are paying attention, I published a document of the railway system where I explained that these quarantines and containment zones would exist and that people that were working within the infrastructure and for the infrastructure would have to have some kind of paperwork. Well, guess what? That's real. They are going to have paperwork. And that's why, I'd been calling it 1929 meets 9/11 in a slow rollout event. But James Corbett is so correct when he says it's 1929 plus 1984 plus 9/11. Because we're getting all these different aspects, including what? Outward internet censorship on the way. So again, in a couple minutes, we are going to join the live broadcast with Taylor Hudak, with Andrew, with Steve, with Christy, and I believe they have Ray McGovern on this evening. And I wish I had gotten the Ray McGovern take on all of this. But, it's been so much, guys. It's been so much with my nieces being here, and they're just starting up their school the last couple of days, getting ready for that, like basically on the computer. They have their stuff, gearing them up to be in this house, because I don't think that anybody's really prepared to have to be in their home for what looks like 6 months in New York State at least. I mean, those are the type of things they're talking about. Trump is outwardly talking about wartime measures and comparing this to the time of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, while at the same time saying that this isn't going to be like the Great Depression. No, it's actually going to be worse. Okay? That's the reality of this. And de Blasio saying wartime measures and such. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute their mic. I'm going to join with video, and then just please bear with me as I set this up.
About how there's been elderly people crammed together in this room for 3 to 6 hours, or like I think it was 2 to 3 hours, waiting to vote. And I was just wondering if there's any like recourse or legal action that would be taken from intentionally asking people to contaminate themselves by not closing down polling locations and encouraging them to go to polling sites when there is a pandemic actively going on. Because I know in some countries, spreading the pandemic intentionally is a crime. And I was just wondering if you knew about anything, maybe U.S. law that would criminalize that.
I wouldn't have the first clue about US law, but my only comments on that front would be two things, which the second might not be very popular. The first one is that the DNC doesn't give a shit about anybody except themselves. That's what it comes down to. They don't care whether you get a disease or don't get a disease. I don't even think they care whether you vote or you don't vote, because at the end of the day, they're going to pick whoever they want to, regardless of who votes for whoever. So I really don't think it matters a whole lot to them. Of course, it matters to people who are impacted on the ground. People are affected on the ground, but I don't think it matters to the institution of the DNC whatsoever. And then the second thing I would mention is that I spent 4 hours of my life watching Hillary's recent propaganda documentary last week, which, while I had to grit my teeth through a lot of it, had some very, very enlightening stuff in there. For example, when her team's talking to her about whether or not Bernie's a threat, and she says, Bernie is a career politician. This is just his shtick. All of this, like, I'm for the people, I'm a socialist, free everything for everyone stuff is a shtick. He's a career politician. He'll take the money and he'll sell out at the moment when it counts. That was Hillary's analysis during the 20s. Like in the lead, I should give context. In the documentary, they're filming her run up to the 2016 election. She knew Bernie would roll over for her months and months and months before he did. She had his number from the outset. She knew. She's openly saying he's in it for the money. At the end of the day, he'll take the money. And every single time you see Bernie is getting cheated, Bernie, this is happening to Bernie, that's happening to Bernie, Bernie says one of two things. He either says, I will vote, I will side with whoever the Democratic nominee is. Or the second thing he says is, donate money to my campaign, give me more money, 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 money. These are the two things that you consistently hear out of Bernie, when he should be saying, I'm being cheated, this is a fraud, this party is a crock, we have to tear it down, we need an alternative. He's not saying these things. He's saying, I'm going to side with whoever is the Democratic nominee and give me money. Now, do people not listen to what he says? I mean, do they not like put two and two together and go, oh, hang on a second, maybe he's saying I'll vote for whoever the nominee is because he knows it's not going to be him and he doesn't give a toss whether it's him or not because he's already got his plan to cash out and vote for the nominee. And he's saying, give me money, money. Why is he saying I will vote for whoever the nominee is and give me money? Like that, these things are not compatible. If you're actually trying to be the nominee, okay, fine. But you're already saying, oh, yeah, I'll go with whoever gets it. But give me money, give me money, give me money. And it amazes me that I feel like people conflate what Bernie's supporters want, what his base wants, what his movement wants, with what Bernie wants. They assume that because all of his supporters and his movement want A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that Bernie wants that. What Bernie wants is to continue his happy life as a career politician and to do so in a way that is both smooth and profitable. That's what Bernie wants. And I'm really sorry because I'd just like to add one caveat to that, and that's that I actually wish he was real. I wish he was real. I wish it was all real. I wish that all those people given hope and working on his movement, busting their asses every day, all those activists, I wish it was for something other than a repeat of 2016. But that's not the case. And the writing is right there on the wall. And if you want to go watch Hillary's stupid propaganda documentary, she says it right there, months before he rolled over in 2016.
So we are now also streaming on Jason Burma's channel. So to Jason Burma's audience, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. You are watching the Action for Assange, Free Assange Vigil. Jason, I see you nodding your head as Susie was talking about Bernie Sanders. I see that it's got you really fired up and you have a response. So Jason, thank you so much for joining us. You're a returning guest on the Vigil. So I do want to give you the opportunity to respond, and then I'll open it up to the other guests and my co-hosts.
Well, I think Susie just killed it. I mean, it was basically what I've been saying for months now. The man didn't have, the wherewithal to stand up when he actually won in 2016. So what did we actually expect? He said he was aware of the Assange issue. He never commented on it once. He refused to really discuss the obvious collusion of the Democratic National chair getting everybody to back Biden, an openly senile man that on both sides of the media spectrum, nobody is saying, hey, by the way, he has visible dementia. I mean, this is the world we're living in. I don't trust the voting we're getting. And at this time, we have a verifiable crisis where people are panicking, where polling places are being closed, and elections are openly being talked about being suspended. Where is this guy on these issues? He's nowhere to be found. But I got to say, the biggest issue now, of course, at least regarding Assange, is as this global lockdown goes throughout the world, right? It's a global lockdown at this point. We're seeing dominoes fall everywhere. Well, guess what? There's prison riots. And we've got our first positive test over at Rikers Island. So now, when you have doctors screaming and shouting that this is a very dangerous place for him to be, and we have the court system openly announcing that any kind of trial that lasts over 3 days probably isn't going to take place, what are we waiting for? Let's get this guy out of there, because you can bet if they smell one snifter of the kind of prison riot we saw in Italy and Belmarsh, they're not just going to let Assange walk out the front door. They may let every other prisoner out of that place. But Assange, I promise you, will not be one of them.
We also just found out that the UK had their first confirmed case of the coronavirus in the prison system. Andrew mentioned earlier, I had a show last night with a gentleman named Jeff Black. He had just started a campaign to release all nonviolent prisoners in the U.S. Jason just nailed it. There's no reason that Julian Assange should still be incarcerated at all. If he's not repatriated, he at least needs to be able to go to a facility where there's competent people who can give him the care that he's been needing for about the last year. It should be just as obvious as don't run a candidate who has dementia, but we're not. I guess we're not in that timeline. I don't know. What do you think, Ray?
I'm hopeful that this opportunity would allow people to think about what happens to Julian. Again, I'm so down on the British judicial system and its ability or its willingness to sort of bend to U.S. diktat that I think you're probably right that everyone will be allowed out except Julian.
And let's talk about that for a minute, because it seems like already, let's talk about this in my state of New York. Forget about the bail reform. They're openly saying they're going to let prisoners out in certain districts. Okay, the panic hasn't set in where the full economic impacts are going to be felt throughout the country. So is that CO going to keep showing up to a job that becomes increasingly dangerous, not only to catch this supposed virus, but because of an uprising in the prison system? I must admit, Ray, I was super surprised to see Hammond and Manning released. Does that give us maybe a glimmer of hope that somebody is going to do the right thing and let Assange out? or do they basically burn it down? I mean, this would be a great opportunity for one of those privatized intelligence services that was looking to snatch him up or poison him or make it look like an accident to do so, no?
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. It's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen, but I think that the new agitation in favor of Julian is the only thing we can do, and that's what we're doing here. But I think that to the degree we can give a lot of play to what the doctors and what the lawyers and what the other people are saying about Julian's condition, that's all to the good.
So, what is your take on why, in short order, basically Manning and Hammond were released? What do you think the levers of power that turned so quickly? Why is that?
That's hard to say. I just don't know. I'm no expert on domestic politics here, and people keep asking me to say things more profound than the next person, and I have to beg off on that one. I don't know.
So I got to ask you then, Ray, while we're in the midst of this now, what is forget about me calling it a global pandemic. That's what's in the news. That's what's being portrayed. What is your best advice to American citizens? I mean, you're a former intelligence analyst of 26 years. What would you tell a guy like me? How would you tell me to prepare?
Yeah. My son is a doctor, and he sent around a kind of a cheat sheet about what people should do. But anyone who's been watching TV or online will know that you're supposed to, wash your hands and stay away from other people. It's not just a couple of feet; it's 6 feet maybe. Until things clarify. Apparently, this stuff is so noxious that it can be sprayed, or it's aerosol type stuff. So I don't really know, but people are getting good advice from all this, and who knows? The Chinese seem to have a leg up, at least in Hunan, and if that's, well, of course there are differences in the way people have reacted and with the speed with which they've reacted. So who knows what's going to happen? This is sui generis. I mean, this not happened before, at least in my 80 years, and Americans are not used to it. So everything is pretty unpredictable at this point, and people are really scared.
While we're on the topic of the coronavirus, because there's something that personally horrifies me, and Susie or you, Ray, could weigh in on this. Throughout human history, there is verifiable evidence that governments have used crises to target political dissidents in their solutions to said crises. Do you think that I'll call them the dissident class, the people that are vocal and speaking out and trying to change the system, whether it's on a YouTube show or in the streets, should take some type of adequate measure to prepare themselves for the situation where the governments roll out camps into the now vacant and barren supermarkets and big box stores throughout the country? Because it seems to me like there's this pre-built infrastructure in the failings of our global economic system that's left vacant buildings that are in some cases acres large that they could put human beings into. Should we as dissidents be worried about the government response? And if we should be, what should we do about it?
Well, I guess it all depends on where we are. Here in the U.S., people who speak out are already in danger. John Kiriakou was arrested on the street, and they charged him with stuff that they made up. And it's come out now in court that he was not guilty of what they're saying. Other people have been harassed, all kinds of folks, people who are journalists and others. So I just don't know what to say, except that this creates another opportunity for that to happen. And, what happens to people in the FBI and elsewhere when they continue to serve under people like they did under Comey and the others, I'm afraid they will salute smartly and do what they're told. So that's especially troubling. And that goes for the local police as well. So, yeah, one should be more careful, but I'm already being careful. And as you know, Regina Haspel already knocked me off this program once. We'll just wait until she knocks me off again.
Well, you know, I
My
do want to
take
talk
on
about
that.
some of the things that are obviously just being talked about. You know, Trump, what they're asking today will be mandated tomorrow. For instance, social gatherings of 10 or less. That kind of makes protest impossible. That makes gathering impossible. We know that big tech companies and the White House met over 4 weeks ago. Why? To control information. They discussed this. YouTube has openly said that they'll be taking more videos down via bots because they can't just manually review them. They're understaffed, so things that don't go against their guidelines can also be censored. I think this is what's frightening. We can already see the lockdowns in place. De Blasio, less than 48 hours ago, said that they would make a decision to lock down New York City or self-isolate. Again, it will be less enforced at first, but it will be fully enforced later. I truly believe that New Rochelle is no more a hotspot in New York than any other place. They clearly used selective testing to bottleneck off the city. That's clearly right there by the Cuomo Bridge, the Washington Bridge, and the Lincoln Tunnel, as to not panic people. I just think our country, what's left of it, Ray, unfortunately, is going to be unrecognizable in the next 1 to 2 months. And I don't know what we get back, because when these people have taken power, executive action, for instance, we've never gotten those rights back. And Cuomo himself put cyber attacks in this latest bill that was passed without question. It seems like now the coronavirus equals hurricanes, equals floods, equals natural disasters, equals unforeseen cyber attacks, and anything else they want to put. Can the genie ever go back in the bottle after this? And this is for Ray or Susie.
I would just say that you can't take what's happening now in isolation, because this is not something that's just happening in 2020. This has been an entire decade of legislation being introduced that encroaches upon civil liberties and in extremely dangerous ways. The NDAA, for example, which Chris Hedges and others fought all the way to the Supreme Court, but unfortunately were deemed to not have standing and therefore did not win the case. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, I believe it was, allowed the indefinite detention of American citizens. The drone program has assassinated American citizens overseas. So you have these really horrible precedents, and then you add mass surveillance on top of that. And on it goes. I mean, I recently did a study of security legislation that had been passed in my home country of New Zealand, and every single year of the last decade, a new bill or act was passed through Parliament, usually under urgency, within very short periods of time, that directly impact civil liberties, restrict civil liberties, and further empower the government and the intelligence agencies to take actions against citizens. And those bills are not, don't just pertain to New Zealand. There are equivalent pieces of legislation right across the Western world. So this has been it's been a long, slow walk across the decade to get to this point. And it seems that now we are really at the 11th hour, if not the 12th hour.
Well, when you talked about, you know, people that are disclosing information and documentation like the NDAA, now we have this new counterintelligence 2020 to 2022, which associates what? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Iran, Hezbollah, public disclosure organizations, hacktivists, leaktivists. Well, for instance, am I now a public disclosure organization? Because none of the media is printing this thing from the Association of American Railroads, where they are getting documentation for their infrastructure for your papers, please, at what? Containment and quarantine areas in America. Haven't seen this one published. I'll be the first to publish it because people know. Does that make me a hacktivist? Does that make me a leaktivist? I didn't write this. This is real. I'm not censoring it. It shouldn't be censored. People should know what they're in for. And 2020 already looks so much different than 2019. I really wonder where we're headed. Steve, do you have any ideas? Because I know that you have great insight over at Slow News Day.
Well, what they're doing right now is trying to pass something called the Earn It Act, which will kill end-to-end encryption for us. Every single message that goes out digitally instantly gets surveilled before it transmits. Um, the guise is it's for the children. That's how they're billing it. It's to protect the kids. Um, you're right when you say once this goes to the executive order level, once this gets put on the books, we don't get those rights back. I just threw it in the chat, but we're obligated to dissent. We're it's something that we have to do peacefully, uh, but often, and to the point to where it becomes one of those waves. It's supposed to only take 3.5% of the population to enact a little bit of change. I think that we're witnessing, 12th hour status for what little liberties we do have left here. So I hope we respond accordingly.
Well, I mean, at this point, I don't think there's any doubt this is a global, transformative human event. This is 1929 meets 1984 meets 9/11 in a slow rollout. I mean, it's got all the flavors. Today, you had Trump talking about FDR wartime movement, but then denying it would be as bad as the Great Depression. Yet, yesterday talking about how this was worse for the airline industry than 9/11. The stock market floor will not open tomorrow. It is online trading only, and that means eventually that will be closed once the bank runs happen. What happens? We are in complete uncharted territory, and I just hope people are prepared. I mean, I hope and pray that somehow there is some kind of positive outcome on this, and I hope and pray that we can get Assange out of that prison system before all hell breaks loose, as we're seeing in Italy. That is a first world nation. People should be taking note. Is there anybody that disagrees with me that we shouldn't be heeding the warnings of Italy at this point? I guess that's a
Crickets.
no. Susie?
Crickets. That's all I said. Crickets. Of course, we should learn from those who are weeks or into months ahead of us on the trajectory that most of the Western world is currently following very closely. I think Germany and France are not that far behind Italy, looking at the numbers coming out. I mean, I have many concerns about this corona situation. If I can cut back just for a second, I think this might be really beneficial for you, and I'd love to get Ray's comment on it as well. And that's if I can just quickly share screen. I will show you, this is the security legislation that was passed in New Zealand across the last decade. So we have, these are the bills and the years that they were passed, and then this is just a one sentence description of each bill, and I think it's worth going through. And you can find this on protectsusie.com under timelines if anyone's interested in going and having a look for yourself. In 2012, the Search and Surveillance Act was passed, which was a dramatic expansion of surveillance powers for many government agencies. Even agencies like the Department of Fisheries were given surveillance powers, for example. Basically, all government agencies got surveillance powers under this act. It also changed the right to silence, even for press, so that journalists in New Zealand no longer have a right to silence. In 2013, the famous GCSB bill was passed, which forced every ISP internet service provider in New Zealand to create backdoors in their systems for the government, spy agencies, to access. They also deputized internet service provider staff to work for the spies to facilitate the transfer of the private information of their customers, and legalized mass surveillance of New Zealanders. In 2014, the Countering Terrorist Fighters Bill enabled warrantless domestic visual surveillance, which means they can actually place video cameras inside your home and film you inside your home without a warrant. And then they can use that information that they gain from that video surveillance to get a warrant. In 2015, there was a new policy introduced the cybersecurity strategy of 2015. It was devised and introduced by then Prime Minister John Key, who is an ex-New York Federal Reserve Bank member. And it was followed by New Zealand sending their cybersecurity staff to Israel for advanced training. Now, I think you'll find that all of the cybersecurity staff of the Western world have at one point or another been sent to Israel for training or are working closely with them. 2016, the Intelligence and Security Bill allowed sharing of incidentally obtained info with Five Eyes partners, which you might remember as something that Snowden, as part of what Snowden had revealed in his 2013 exposures. And this retroactively, as many of these bills have done, retroactively legalized an illegal, formerly illegal practice that the spy agencies were engaged in. It also outlawed whistleblowing for members of intelligence services in New Zealand, with a minimum of 5 years in jail if they were to blow the whistle on their agencies, and also allowed the government to cancel the passports of national security targets. And that became the Intelligence and Security Act of 2017, which was supposed to be, it was billed as being this major overhaul of the spy services to rein them in. But in fact, lo and behold, it didn't rein them in. It just dramatically expanded their powers and resources. That included the implementation of class-based warrants, which are basically what Americans know as a general warrant, where they can have bulk targeting of multiple citizens, even citizens who aren't connected to each other. For example, they can get a warrant for a location, and then they can surveil and spy on every person or particularly mobile phone that passes through that location. So it's bulk targeting of citizens under one single warrant. Then in 2018, we had the Customs and Excise Act passed, which forced travelers to hand over personal information, passwords, and decryption keys for all of their devices. And now in 2019, we had the most terrifying, probably, the Terrorism Suppression Control Orders Bill of 2019, which allows the police commissioner, not a court, not a judge, not a jury, the police commissioner to arbitrarily apply a control order to any New Zealand citizen, which has, I've put here, a regime of harsh restrictions and monitoring, but actually what it does is they can keep you under house arrest without having force you to be have an ankle bracelet and be stuck in your house without ever arresting you or charging you or prosecuting you or convicting you of anything. They can put you on home detention. They can decide whether where you can or cannot work, how you can earn money, who you can associate with, who you can communicate with, whether or not you can have internet access. You are gagged, and it's illegal for you to tell anybody that a control order has been applied to you. And any reporter or member of the press who reports on the fact that a control order has been applied to you is subject to a $30,000 fine. That was 2019. Now we're in 2020. So when you take everything that I just covered and then you slap the coronavirus stuff on top of that, tell me where we're at.
Sounds like
the last sentence I'll add to that is that those control orders, they were sold as to be applied to New Zealand citizens who might have been involved in terrorism overseas. When they return to New Zealand, they get these control orders. Of course, we know WikiLeaks had counterterrorism resources used against it and was defined as a terrorist organization. And this week, the New Zealand government put out a blanket call for all New Zealand citizens around the world to return home, any of whom could then be subject to one of these control orders. But continue. Here we are in 2020 with Corona on top of that type of legislative history.
So something, because I'm a solutions-oriented person, and I can't stop the deep state. I can help people proliferate information to do so. But what I can do, and what we've been advocating on this show since the very beginning, is building local power regardless of political ideology. And I didn't want to talk about it on this stream, but I feel like it's really important with the weight of this conversation and with everything going on right now, because the government response from the federal level we're seeing is a slow rollout of testing and the use of the military to do whatever the hell they're gonna slowly start to do On the local level, though, we have so much power, and people don't realize it. People don't see it. People don't have the ability to possess it or even generally manifest the power of a community. And I'm not talking about sovereign citizens, and I'm not talking about like editing your city charter. I literally mean bringing people together to accomplish goals. So this is just a personal victory. It's the thing I've been doing to keep my spirits up. I reached out to every city, every municipality in my county this week and said, what is our plan for food security as this crisis deepens in the next 3 to 6 months? None of them had an answer. So I called them again and I said, would you be interested in setting up a municipal farming program? Right now, everyone is on space restriction, physical space restriction. We're not allowed to gather. We can't have soccer events. Can we start ripping up the fields, ripping up the green spaces, and start farming as a matter of emergency? Our parks and recreation departments are getting laid off. Can we use them, divert their resources, and have them literally start tilling up all of the green space within our community? And I got a resounding, send me a proposal. What does this look like? I have 5 of the 11 cities in my community that have already discussed this internally and want to move forward with some kind of idea. And I have 1 city in my community that is already identifying locations in conjunction with a city outside of my county that they're going to begin using for municipal farming programs. I've connected with the local beekeepers association to provide pollinating colonies for those farm sites that are going up. I've connected with the local 4-H groups to use this as an educational program for the kids to learn how to farm, because it is that oldest, greatest generation that is the most at risk right now. And it is the youngest generation that doesn't know where food comes from half the time. So on top of that, I've connected with our local community college and a beautiful professor out there who I'm not going to name for personal reasons, who's helping pull all of these resources together. I spent an hour and a half on the phone with him in a parking lot today, and I'm getting a proposal typed up and sent out to my local communities because it's a matter of urgency. And getting your community to start growing food for your community now, regardless of what the intelligence communities are doing, regardless of what the bullshit happening at the federal level is doing, it secures a source of food. And seeing a true leader response, seeing a true equitable response to the emergencies that we're facing, because people are panicking, people are scared, we're having runs on stores. And when they start seeing the tractors pulling up the fields and people going behind and putting seeds in the ground, they can say, I didn't even think that we could do this. And I hope that what I can do is to inspire people to keep finding things that people will say, I didn't even think that we can do this. Because this was something that I was sitting there just like, how the hell am I going to feed all of the people in my county? I can't. But I can get all of the people in my county to do a little bit of work to feed themselves. Because even in social isolation, I'll call it physical isolation because I hate the term social, you can have 8 people working a quarter acre of land, all spread 100 to 125 feet apart, still talking, still interacting, still building a community that we have been devastated against and lost. So I don't have a good answer. I can't stop the deep state. I can't prevent them from drone striking me today. But what I can do is try my hardest until they find a way to stop me, to return power to my city and give people something to defend when these troops come in to take it. So that's my hope, I guess, is that people can reach out into their communities and find solutions that divert the response. Because if my community is not screaming that they need help from the state and federal government, there is less of a reason for the military to come into my community. If we can secure our own food in 3 months by growing root vegetables initially, having beans grow on top of those and corn grow above it, we will have food. And this is something that Steve actually inspired me to care about. And then one of my friends reached out to me about mutual aid. And I'm going to use this entire process and working with all of these people to also talk about Julian Assange, because I'm connecting with everyone on my local level. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a Julian Assange activist. I'm really worried about press freedom, but I need to make sure we can feed everyone so I can have a community to organize in 6 months.
I totally
So,
agree, Andrew. That's one of the best things I've heard, because obviously I've been telling people to get prepared. And right now, I mean, if you're listening to Andrew Cuomo, if you're living in New York like me, they're saying not 2 to 3 months anymore. They're not saying 3 to 6. They're saying 6 to 9. So the more prepared you can be, the better. I'm going to jump off the stream so you can give Ray a little bit more time. You guys are killing it. How can people support you that are in my audience other than just going to actionforassange.com? Where can they really help you out? And let's not forget this issue. You know, like you just said, we've got hardships coming up. But at the same time, we still have to press people to understand, you know, that Roger Waters interview with Tucker Carlson. It was fantastic. It's something that kind of just blew by in the wind because of everything that was happening in the country. How can people continue to support Assange and hopefully now in rapid fashion get him out of what may be a death sentence?
So if you go to our website, which is horribly out of date, we still have banners up from our DC event. The wonderful people that help us behind the scenes have a lot of personal things going on. There's a post in there called Thursday Toolbox. I talked about it at the beginning of the stream, but it offers 3 different technologies: ResistBot, Contacting Congress, and then one other tool. And what it allows you to do, those 3 different technologies, one of them enables you to send faxes to your state and local government officials, as well as some within executive administrations. Contacting Congress gives you the addresses and phone numbers to every United States representative in the House and in the Senate. It gives you their local office phone numbers, their local office addresses. Christine, Miss Assange, has been urging people to do handwritten letters, to do polite calls of support. And then the other tool that's on there gives you the social media links: Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as the phone number for their congressional office in DC to contact them. We're all isolated. People are telling us to stay home. Use these digital tools to make their office a central hub of information for Julian. Send them faxes with every news article you can find. Run them out of paper, for goodness sakes. Thursday Toolbox. What we're hoping is at least for an hour every Thursday that people can take a little initiative to send this. I would love people to do it during the vigils so they can listen to us talk and send faxes like crazy or send tweets like crazy to these people. So get involved locally, but at the same time, make sure that we can keep our eye on the prize of getting Julian Assange out of prison, because at the end of the day, we have so many rights to defend right now that we can bring these struggles together.
And not just rights, but also people. And Julian was the king of saving people. This whole WikiLeaks cost lives is the total opposite of the truth. WikiLeaks saved lives. Julian saved lives. Julian saved lives that there was nobody else who could save. And I'm not Snowden, obviously, but also others, other journalists, other at-risk whistleblowers. Julian stepped in and intervened and saved them. And we need him back for many reasons, but also for that reason. I just want to show you something very quickly, Andrew, that I've just stumbled across, and that is that Occupy Sandy, who is a group that supported tens of thousands of people in New York City during Hurricane Sandy by setting up mutual aid centers, by commandeering warehouses, by getting people to donate the things they don't need, and then finding people who needed those things, and working with churches actually as well to find places of refuge for people who were stranded because their homes were flooded.
All right, guys, I just wanted to leave that meeting beforehand. If you want to continue to watch those guys over at Action for Assange, they are live. Make sure to go over there and subscribe to them. I do just want to leave you with one other thing. You know, the way I've prepared my family is also I've talked to my neighbors, and I've hoped that they've prepared their families. And I have 6 months of food for my family because I don't want to be in the 2020 bread line. Now, is every place going to be on lockdown for 6 months? Nobody knows the future. But unfortunately, these are some trying times. They are now talking about letting out prisoners in Rikers Island. We now have our first confirmed case of a prisoner with COVID-19 there. We live in interesting times, my friends, and 2020 is going to be those years that defines a generation. So listen, Burmis Brigade, I'm going to keep doing it for you. I'm going to keep coming live. I'm going to be reporting the news no matter how disturbing. And hopefully I've sounded the alarm to enough of you that you know you don't want to be in a major city if you don't have to be. That if you're in New York City, it could be the worst place in the country. And that hopefully, folks, we can band together and get through this, because this is coming. And it is a bulldozer I believe almost nobody is ready for. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the flip.